I had the opportunity of playing Marathon the past couple weeks, and I got a solid 50 hours of gameplay in. A little bit about me. I used to stream and play a good amount of Destiny 1 and Destiny 2, mainly PvP. I played all the Halo games growing up, and I've played quite a few extraction shooters like The Cycle and Dark and Darker, so I'm not new to the genre, and I've played shooters for a vast majority of my life. I'll be going over initial thoughts, pros, cons, and feedback. I won't be going over the general flow of extractions, as many people have already done so, and probably have done it better. I just want to go over my thoughts on what's to come and what I'd hope to see moving forward. It's important to note that this was an alpha. They already mentioned visuals were not priority. There were only a certain amount of vendors available, as well as classes and maps, so it's not ideal to view this as a final product in any way, shape, or form. But given the release date, it's important to bring up some pain points, especially considering the competition that's recently reared its head. Looking at you, ARC Raiders. So, my initial thoughts is it's fun. There's some good and some bad. Some concerns overall, but the idea and potential is there. As far as the demographic goes, if you're a Destiny looter shooter who's more PvE focused, this probably isn't for you, but I wouldn't write it off entirely. If you enjoy Tarkov and its more hardcore experience, this also might not be for you, as it's more casual and faster paced, but again, I wouldn't just outright say it's not for you. If you're new to the genre entirely, specifically a console player, I think this would be a good game for you to try. It's important to note, though, that these extraction shooters can be a little more frustrating in comparison to your standard shooter, just due to the high risk, high reward game loop. I think there's a big opportunity here for Bungie, but it would be wise to be cautiously optimistic. There are some pros and cons, as mentioned, but these things all are subject to change, so let's go ahead and get into it. So, starting off with the pros, first and foremost, the gunplay feels great. And this shouldn't really be a surprise to you, though, as many Bungie games have had incredible gunplay, as it's one of the things that Bungie has gotten right very often. The speed and pace of the game is faster than Tarkov, which I personally enjoy, and it's more beginner friendly as an introduction to the genre in comparison to other extraction shooters. Extracting with loot feels rewarding, as well as wiping squads. When you get a big exfil, it makes up for several runs where you might not have been successful. Having the rush of fighting a team, trying to loot without getting third partied, and then making your way to the exfil can be quite the rush, and it has the opportunity to feel fantastic. The environment and storytelling is great. Minus some outside areas like the Dire Marsh and some of the mountain ranges and perimeter, the insides look incredible, and I generally enjoy the art direction. They've also mentioned that they will be tweaking the visuals, so I wouldn't necessarily worry about that. But I understand if the visuals are not for you, as it's a somewhat polarizing topic. The trailer video they released was awesome. I'm curious about the world Marathon exists in, and I'm excited for pieces to be revealed each season. Dedicated servers are very nice. I'm a big fan. One thing I'm curious about is the server tick rate, but it isn't something that's make or break. I will say that I did trade with someone, which is slightly upsetting, but somewhat expected as this has been a thing pretty much in all Bungie games since like Halo 2. The borrow system is nice, and I think the vintage items are pretty neat because it lets you sell items for a higher value if you're low on credits. So you don't have to go on money runs if need be, you can just simply sell those items after a couple successful runs. Since I'm making this after the playtest ended, I do want to bring up the speed at which they have addressed some concerns already, such as the original aim assist for mouse and keyboard. They quickly got rid of it after hearing the feedback from the community, so that's a big win for them. I hope to see more of this, as well as a better balancing job in comparison to Destiny, as they used to always bring up balancing problems due to PvE. But since this is a PvP centric game, I'm expecting them to be more swift and more vocal in comparison to the Crucible of Destiny. They've also mentioned they will be showing the fourth map before release, which is a good idea in my opinion, as it's supposed to have some of the cooler secrets, enemies, and the stuff that Bungie tends to excel at. So let's get into the concerns now, and I think the biggest one for me is the lack of solo lobbies. I believe this is an absolute necessity, especially whenever a game like Arc Raiders is coming out both with solo lobbies and with proximity chat. In a PvP centric game, forcing others to queue with randoms is not ideal, especially when, for some reason, whether it's a bug or intended, the voice comms are muted by default. I'm not a fan of games that force you to play with two other people or more. I stopped playing Apex at the time because of this, and this was also one of the many reasons I stopped playing Destiny, as it's not solo focused at all. At least, whenever I was playing, it wasn't. Oftentimes, I would queue up, and the randoms wouldn't have their mics on. This is something I'll bring up later with both a UI concern and a general gameplay concern, but it can be quite frustrating if you came off of a good run, you have good loot, and you queue in with someone who doesn't want to help because they went off on their own. They don't have a mic, or what have you. It's one thing to lose loot from a 3v3 fight, but it's another thing to lose it because your random went to Biomarsh because they got to do a contract and they didn't tell you. Money runs are something common in this genre, so you go in with nothing, like a knife. Hope to leave with something. But this can be annoying if you're paired with someone who's on a money run, or you yourself are the one on the money run. Having solo lobbies would definitely help alleviate this issue. Bungie have mentioned that they are only focusing on balancing for threes at the time, but I'd rather have an unbalanced solo option than none at all. If they're concerned about balancing, a suggestion would be to make a gear score cap for the lobbies. For example, you can make the lobby have a gear cap of green rarity or blue rarity, meaning you could only bring in things of green or blue rarity, and you'd likely only find green or blue rarity items as well on the maps. You could also make the quote easy maps like perimeter the solo lobby maps only. Another big concern of mine is invisibility, specifically from Void. The invisibility from Void is incredibly powerful, and I personally don't think invisibility belongs in a competitive shooter as is, but it's likely gonna stay, so in my opinion, it needs to be heavily nerfed. The fact that you can stand completely still and go completely invisible is not good gameplay. Void was listed as the number one pick for all runners throughout the playtest, and it's obvious why. I think they need to balance it heavily by either getting rid of the complete invisibility option, but also reducing the amount of time you're able to be invisible. There were multiple times where I had the jump on a void, went to push them, and lost to that guy because he simply stood still. There are several videos out there where void players sat with shotguns and wiped full teams. In a game that focuses more on a faster pace and a slower genre, I feel like this kills that idea. Moving on, though I think Bungie generally nails UI, as mentioned previously, their UI for voice comms is not good. There are three purple dots in the game when accessing the settings that allow you to mute and unmute yourself and teammates. I had no idea this was where you would do it, and it had to be pointed out to me. I brought it up to multiple randoms who didn't know either, as it's not something that's brought up in the tutorial, at least to my knowledge. And it generally doesn't indicate something you'd even click, it just looks like three purple circles. Also, I'm unsure if this is intended or not, but every time you start the game, you're by default muted. This is another concern since you're forcing trios, and that means randoms might not have the mic on at all. So, this next part is going to be more feedback and general questions, though there are still some concerns in there. One of the biggest concerns or feedback questions I have is how are you going to keep player retention? One thing I think that Bungie has an opportunity to do is add some sort of raid or strike boss in some of the later maps, with something like multi team coordination being a part of it, or unlocking puzzles to reveal the boss. Bungie does well with both secrets and boss design, so I think in order to separate itself from the rest of the extraction shooters, this needs to be implemented in some way, shape, or form. Now, I don't have the answer on how it'll look or what have you, but something needs to be added. Having the option to exfil from the same spot that another team just used isn't great in my opinion. Originally, it was said that each team has their own exfil, but I've personally gone up to an exfil after it was used and used it for myself, so I don't know if that information is correct. Instead, I think they should do something like Dark and Darker does. For those who don't know, Dark and Darker starts off with only a few portals available in a big map, and the longer the game progresses, the more portals appear, and the portals are only one time use. This incentivizes more fights between teams, and I think this would be good to do as well. Granted, they have a storm, and I don't think adding a storm is necessary at all, but it does push the players closer to one another until the round ends. I'd also like to see some sort of material conversion, as I had about 50 blue synthetic rubber, but only one of the purple equivalent. Even if the conversion rate is god awful, like 20 of a blue material to one purple, I still think this would be beneficial. Another question I had was ranked. What on earth is that going to look like? I would assume gear score would be the way to balance lobbies and cosmetics would be the grind, but Other than that, they haven't really talked about it, which is slightly concerning considering they did say the two big things they were most excited about was the fourth map and ranked. Now, I wouldn't even call this a concern, more so a nitpick, but the runners or heroes themselves aren't super original. Visually, sure, most of them gameplay wise though, feels like the ideas were taken straight from Apex. I mean, they're also adding a heal class and a class with a grapple, which I can't help but think about Lifeline and Pathfinder from Apex, though I do love Pathfinder, so nothing really stood out and made me feel like I was playing a completely different hero shooter. I'd like to see some more originality from them in this regard. Some more feedback that has been heavily talked about is mods and letting you take them off of weapons. Currently, this isn't allowed, and I feel like this does not align with the customize your runner to your playstyle at all. Furthermore, a hero based shooter doesn't really give that kind of playstyle in general. Sure, you can add mods and cores to make your character not overheat as fast, or you can jump higher, but it's still incredibly limited to what you happen to find on your run. Now, again, that could be subject to change as we only had a couple factions to work with, and they probably didn't have everything in the game. So, this one, again, is more of a nitpick, but it is also a potential concern if nothing changes. Another piece of feedback I would say is the in game events that you do don't really bring much value as far as gameplay is concerned. Sure, they are there in order to make you get higher rated drops or keys, and also a way for other teams to find and engage fights, but they feel closer to patrol missions in Destiny, and I'd like to see more creative ideas there. Lastly, I feel like keys are pretty scarce, which is probably intended, but before they unlocked all faction upgrades, I was stuck for a very long time because I was missing 8 of one specific purple rarity item, but I had like 20 of one of the other purple materials as well. This also falls in line with the randoms and voice comms issue. I would bring in a key sometimes, and then my teammates wouldn't go to the area that I needed to go to, and then we would wipe, resulting me losing not only my good gear, but that key, which is pretty hard to find. Now, I will say that the higher ranked enemies do drop them, and there are places to find them, but it's not a guarantee. And if they're not a guarantee, I'd like to see the material conversion. So, my final thoughts is the game was fun. I'm cautiously excited for the release, and I think the marathon world is very interesting. The game has a lot of potential, but I've said that about Destiny PvP before, and I don't play that game anymore. And that's not a diss, it's just I've closed that chapter of my gaming life, and I enjoyed the game for what it was. The core idea and gunplay is there, but gunplay alone won't be enough. The randoms I did get the chance to talk to most reiterated my main concerns about solo lobbies, Void needing a nerf, and proximity chat. But they did also say they really enjoyed the game. Lastly, if you're the type of person who says games are woke, DEI, or the game will be dead on arrival, or you follow Grums or any other grifter, this game isn't for you. And not because the game is bad, but because you're a moron. You don't play games, you only exist to be mad at things on the internet for no reason. So, go away. That's all.